I think a lot of people intrinsically know that XRP is useful, but I don't think that, just saying, hey, it's the 3 to 5 second payments and everything like that really sets it apart anymore because there's so many cryptos out there. You have to ask yourself, why would an institution pick XRP over everything else? And there's actually a really good reason why, but most people just kind of scratch the surface and don't get into the weeds of it with that reasoning. So what we're going to attempt to do here is we're going to attempt to go at least a little bit down that path and explain why XRP and Ripple really is a primary focus for institutional use, as opposed to something like even stablecoins, right? They've talked a lot about stablecoin legislation over the past number of months and year, right? And pushing a lot of legislation through for that. You might think to yourself, well, they'll probably just use that instead of XRP. But that's not necessarily the case. So let's dive into it. Let's go ahead and look at Ripple, what they do as a company, and why institutions are probably looking to XRP. Okay, so everybody at this point who is in the XRP army knows what Ripple is, right? We know the company, we know what they do, the cross-border payments, and the focus. But what you may not know is something called RippleNet. And RippleNet is essentially just the umbrella of technology that everything flows through within the company Ripple, right? So whenever these cross-border payments happen, they happen within that umbrella technology, RippleNet. Now, RippleNet does not necessarily use XRP in their transactions. So this is kind of important to know, right? Because when people come to you and they say, hey, good news for Ripple doesn't necessarily mean good news for XRP. Well, they're partially right, but that's only half of the story. Because the other half of the story is there's something called ODL, which if you think of it, it's kind of like the second part of RippleNet. So if I'm an institution, I can use just standard RippleNet, which is better than Swift, but I can also use ODL, which is on-demand liquidity, and ODL always uses XRP. So you might ask, okay, well, why use Ripple and RippleNet as opposed to Swift? Let's just start there, right? RippleNet, while it's not the 3 to 5 second payments that you see with XRP, it is faster, right? It's upgraded technology, upgraded messaging systems from what you see with Swift. It doesn't take the 3 to 5 days that you see. It's a little bit faster than that. So that's an upgrade in and of its own. But with RippleNet alone and no ODL, the big problem you still have, among a couple others, is you have things like you need pre-funded accounts. Now you might ask yourself, what is a pre-funded account? A pre-funded account is essentially the idea that, let's say I'm an American banker, right? And I want to send money over to Mongolia to pay somebody over there. Well, if I have $1 million I'm trying to send, I don't really want to use Swift, so maybe instead I use RippleNet. But RippleNet still takes time, right? But if I need to send